can tell you people they were the devil's children.
Greetings from Castle Goring, from Mickey, Aurora and from me. Well, I will continue from Thursdays. The mistakes, and I'm going to wing it through today so that we can cover all the ground. I should not be too thorough. If I'm too thorough, it's going to take too long. So, where are we? Okay, they're now in California. They are being at first housed in Tyler Perry's house. And COVID is giving them shelter. And of course, they have announced that Meghan is pregnant. They have not yet announced that a month or 6 weeks before Meghan became pregnant, that she had lost a baby, that she would then give an op-ed piece in the New York Times about, because her suffering was so great. But they are aware of the fact that this pregnancy is going to give them shelter in more ways than one. None of the awkward problems of Britain, none of the awkward problems of the birth certificate being amended, none of the awkward problems of photographers photographing them on official visits when the baby decides to do a deep dive. None of that is happening this time. But they need to show the world how happy they are, how they have beat Romeo and Juliet, Abelard and Eloise, Mutt and Jeff, Batty and Bench. They are closer than salt and pepper. They go everywhere together and do everything together. And they also have Mr. Harriman, their favorite Nigerian photographer, of course, the son of a multimillionaire. Like Harry and Meghan, a part of an interracial marriage, like Harry and Meghan, very aggressively playing the race card at every opportunity, which of course is something that was being done on their behalf by that wonderfully biracial author amid scabies, half Caucasian on his father's side, half Caucasian on his mother's side, but fully biracial. I thought two halves made one whole. I didn't realize two halves made two wholes. Not quite sure how that one works, but I'm sure Emmett Scabies could tell us. Anyway, Miss Harriman does photographs of a ginormously pregnant Meghan. And if I recall correctly, in one of the photographs, baby Archie is balancing on the bump. And I don't remember if it's that photograph or another photograph where the bump has a give in it in the most extraordinary way. But she was monumental yet again. This, of course, is meant to defeat the rumours that are floating around that Archie was the product of a surrogacy. And they even, in the Netflix show, have her, a glimpse of her with an elephantine belly, which, as a friend of mine who's produced 3 children said, that is not anything I recognize. And that's just one of the many people who made comments along those lines. Well, in the run-up to Brexit, they made it absolutely clear that they intended to keep Frogmore Cottage and their security. And they were spitting mad when they discovered that they would not be able to keep their security. And this is when Meghan's modus operandi as a practiced double-crosser really came into play. And Harry was able to benefit from it as well. Now, off their Oprah interview, you can see that he's complicit, but only up to a point, that she is the prime mover in everything. Well, they by then they thought they had to come up with reasons to justify their treachery to make money, because they needed to make money and they weren't patient enough to go about it in a decent way. Yes, Harry did get $1 million from JP Morgan to stand up barefooted and speak about his pain at losing his mother. But I said at the time that would be a one-off, and it certainly turned out to be. They had been in contact with Oprah from before, and why Brexit failed is that Meghan encouraged Harry to show the negative side of his personality that up to then the palace had suppressed, and that she would give full rein to her negative side that up to then she had suppressed from the audience she wished to impress. Oh, she'd always flaunted it. My children have friends from Canada who were a part of that circle, and she was loathed in Toronto. Once people knew her and she didn't wish to impress them, she would show what a mean girl she was. If she wished to impress you, she'd keep the smile slathered on. But otherwise, it was arrogance, impertinence. Look how important I am. By this time, the royal family knew they were dealing with a snake in the grass. The public didn't. Oprah was the first indication that the public had that Meghan was a nasty piece of work. She duped enough people to do considerable damage to race relations throughout the world, and definitely throughout the Commonwealth, because I got a lot of complaints from diplomats, black diplomats and white diplomats in both the West Indies and Africa about the problems they were having to deal with the less sophisticated and educated members of their electorates, let's put it that way. She was fully into the race baiting, as was Amid Scabies. And she played the race card in Oprah. She also showed the degree of influence that she still had by getting Piers Morgan fired well, constructively dismissed is actually the correct expression. Dame Caroline McCall gave him a choice of apologising for saying he didn't believe her. It turned out she told at least 17 lies. So Caroline McCall had no leg to stand on. Had it been me, I would have sued ITV for every penny that I could have got out of them. Well, Piers didn't. He walked and he simply pitched his tent in another yard, so to speak. She also managed to create such a racist environment that Sharon Osbourne was dismissed for saying that she did not regard Piers Morgan as a racist. But because she had said it to somebody who was a woman of colour, she was dismissed. Now, looking at all of this objectively, with the passage of time, it is so clear that this was racism of the highest order being flagrantly displayed to the detriment of harmonious racial relations, where white people could lose their jobs because they didn't believe a liar who was a woman of colour, and they, being Sharon Osbourne, could be dismissed because they had had the temerity to say that the white man who had been dismissed for failing to believe the lying woman of colour was a racist, but she said he wasn't a racist, so she had to go. I mean, this was race baiting of the highest order. Did they really think they were ultimately going to be able to get away with it? Yes, they did. The climate at the time allowed them to get away with it. Fast forward. COVID ends. Meghan and Harry say they have announced that they have cut a $100 million deal with Netflix and a $20 million deal with Spotify, and he has cut a $20 million deal with Penguin Random House. So they're now very rich. That's the message. And they're worth a great deal. Anything they do is worth a great deal of money. So other offers are now supposed to pour in on the back of these mega deals. They now have to best the Oprah interview. And to an extent, they don't best it, but they live up to it. Or to put it another way, they live down to it with their Netflix six-parter. But before that airs, Meghan's Spotify airs. Now, Spotify was supposed to have been both Meghan and Harry. It became Meghan alone. Yawnsville. So boring. She gets bad reviews. They try to manipulate the figures so it looks good. They failed to end up, they being Spotify, to be able to rescue it. And they ultimately dump her. And Bill Simmons says she and Harry are effing grifters. And says that the crazy ideas Harry came up with were laughable. So that's in autumn. Then comes the Netflix six-parter. That's at the end of the year. So the Queen is now dead. Because the Queen dies in September. And the shows are being aired in autumn and then winter of the same year. What the public don't know, and generally speaking, but I knew, and I actually said it on my channel, that the Queen had prepared rooms for them at Balmoral and had asked them to come. They had refused to come, but the Queen had left the invitation open. Why didn't they come? Well, there were several reasons, one of which was when Harry and Meghan brought over Lily and went and showed the baby to the Queen, they wanted Miss Harriman to photograph them together and had brought Miss Harriman, evidently, and the Queen refused. Well, that, of course, meant that they were going to spite the Queen, because Meghan, I am told, is extremely spiteful, and Meghan by then understood that the Queen was obdurate in her loving responsiveness to not budge an inch, to have Meghan merch and maximize everything commercially on her back. Also, the Queen was absolutely furious that the child was named Lilibet. The Queen thought the child was going to be named Elizabeth, and the Queen was spitting mad that the child was named Lilibet. The Queen did not regard it as anything but a violation, and the Queen was right, because my take on it was pretty much that it was a violation, that this was payback time to the Queen for the Queen having refused them to be half in, half out. And all of this spitefulness is taking place in full view of the public, and the public may not pick up everything that's happening as it happens, but ultimately they will see through smoke screens, and they did. But then the Queen dies while they are in England. They're in England and they have refused to go to Balmoral. They're in England and the children are no longer in England, but they're in England. And Harry wants to impose Meghan upon the family. Now, they couldn't have gone the day before the Queen died. They had a gap in their diary. They could have flown up to Balmoral. They refused to do so. But then Harry wants to inflict Meghan upon the family. And they didn't want Meghan there. They knew Meghan was going to turn it into one tail left eye. And I was her favorite grandchild. Always had been, even before I was born. I was her favorite grandchild. I don't know how I'm going to be able to survive without her. It's like when my Uncle Mike died. I mean, I hadn't seen him for years and I couldn't be bothered to ask him to my wedding. But H had to come back and console me because my Uncle Mike had died. And Harry's granny had died. They wouldn't have it. They absolutely put their foot down and said, no, Meghan. I was told, and I'm going to read out what I was told, that Meghan was furious that the Queen refused to allow her, Meghan, to entrap her, the Queen, with a photograph of the two Lilibets. Since she couldn't get what she wanted, she was going to punish the Queen by withholding their presence. In fact, it was no punishment at all. Everyone was mightily pleased that they didn't have to walk on eggshells with the Sussexes during a visit of even 24 hours. But then Harry tried to force Meghan on everyone by trying to bring her up for the deathbed scene. There were real fears that while Harry was at Balmoral and Meghan was in the south, that she would again play the race card with amid scabies and say that she had been excluded, and the message would be that it was because she was a proud, confident woman of colour, and they didn't know how to deal with a strong, confident woman of colour like her, and so they'd had to exclude her. The Queen died at 2:37. The plane carrying the others, Edward, Sophie, William, I think Andrew, took off at 2:39. I could have got the times wrong. The other one could be 2:39 and the other 2:37, but one was at 2:37 and the other was at 2:39. Her death was recorded, so the plane had been delayed an hour leaving while there was shilly-shallying going on with Harry trying to force Meghan upon them. And finally they took off. And there was a 2-minute gap between her death and the departure of the plane. Her death was recorded at 3:10. Your time of death is usually not the exact time you die. It's the time you're declared dead. They try to do whatever they can to sort of keep you ticking over, especially if loved ones are coming. So the news was then embargoed until 6 p.m. But there was a fear that Meghan would use the intervening 2 hours and 50 minutes from the official moment of death and nearly 4 hours from the time the Queen had, or 3.5 hours from the time the Queen had actually died, to amid scabies. Can you believe it? You're a proud, confident man of colour. You're half Caucasian on your father's side and half Caucasian on your mother's side. You know what these racists are like. Can you please help me? I need the world to know how I'm suffering. To prevent that, I made the announcement that she was dead at 4 o'clock. That meant that there was no possibility of Meghan and amid scabies or anyone else in the intervening time hopping in and saying that God knows what they'd have said, because you never know with people like that what they're going to say. But the likelihood they were going to say something that would be oh, I'm so suffering. I just can't believe how much I'm suffering. Well, that was scuppered by moi. And I have to say, I thought long and hard of it. And I was aware of the fact that it could have backfired in quite an adverse way upon me and my reputation. Fortunately, it didn't. People very quickly understood why I had done what I had done, but at first a few people didn't, and I certainly was criticised initially, although not in the long run. But I did what I felt was the right thing to do, and I felt I was depriving her of the opportunity. Well, behind the scenes, now between the death and the funeral, there's all sorts of talk in royal circles about the mischief that Meghan is possibly getting up to. She and Harry want to do their own walkabout. They're in England. He's the king's son. She's the king's daughter-in-law. We should be getting equal airtime as William and Catherine. I mean, Prince and Princess of Wales. Evidently, the scenes of hysteria were unbelievable. They were made Prince and Princess of Wales so quickly. It was an outrage to at least 2 people in the family. Well, anyway, of course, by then William and Catherine wanted to have nothing to do with Harry and Meghan, because they knew they couldn't trust Harry, because they couldn't trust Meghan, and that anything with Harry was likely to rebound upon them. Well, there was talk that Meghan was trying to plant the story that she was pregnant again. And I don't know if you noticed, but in the walkabout with William and Catherine and Harry, she does have a little bump in her tummy. Now, was that natural? Everything about Meghan's natural, so it obviously was natural. But was she really pregnant again? That's certainly the story that she evidently wanted to be got out, to steal the thunder. And several people were aware of it. And I, for one, said, I am going to studiously ignore it, which I did and everybody else did. And you notice she's never produced another another baby. Sorry. Well, then William and Catherine, with Charles, scuppered the whole business of Meghan and Harry's independent walkabout by doing the walkabout with them, which Catherine said was one of the hardest things she had to do. So then we have the funeral, and there is Meghan, one tear left eye at the funeral. One tear left eye, please notice, and steps aside so that she will be on her own, so that she'll be photographed with tear showing. I'm definitely not going to take the chance of that. Sophie's standing in front of me. She's taller than I am, and she's going to block my one tear left eye. Can you imagine the tension? I say no more. So the Queen is safely buried now. Fortunately, the Queen doesn't live to see Harry's and Meghan's betrayal, the Netflix betrayal, the Netflix series, where they claim that the Commonwealth, which is one of her life legacies, is Empire 2.0, a racist organization to steal money and to steal the natural assets of black countries for the benefit of white countries like Britain. They also have that ridiculous man called the Guppy on, looking like he's sucking water out of his mouth instead of breathing air, making ridiculous claims about bots and all the rest of it, and how trolled Meghan and Harry were, when in fact it turns out that they were the biggest trollers of all. All the figures that he came up with were totally fallacious, just stabs in the dark, yet more racist agendas being pushed. And of course, earlier in the year, Meghan's mischief-making racially had helped to scupper the West Indian tour that William and Catherine took, including and especially in Jamaica, where the British press, not the Jamaicans, because the Jamaican press was not anti-William and Catherine, and the Jamaican people were extremely enthusiastic of William and Catherine, and the criticism that the people were corralled behind fences. People are always corralled behind fences at certain events. But they were pushing their fingers through, and William and Catherine were touching them. That was not an act of condescension. That was an act of warmth, and the people responded accordingly. But Meghan and Harry had created such a racist agenda as a result of their Oprah interview that the visit was absolutely sabotaged. But little did everybody realize at the time that, in fact, they had overplayed their hand, as indeed had Black Lives Matter, because all the abuses there, where the founders were buying $1 million houses while the money wasn't going where it should go, all emerged. But so you have the Netflix series, and then you have crazy things happening in it, like Meghan and Harry are going to defeat the surrogacy rumors by showing a photograph of a scan of a fetus with all the identifying features removed. So it can be a scan of anything from anyone, anywhere. So they're using something to prove that Meghan carried Archie, but removing all the identifying features, that doesn't prove that Meghan carried Archie. That proves that they're trying to prove that Meghan carried Archie without proving that Meghan carried Archie. And they're so dumb that they think that everybody else is going to be as duped as they wanted us to be, and that we wouldn't see through that little con, except we did. Then, of course, there's Meghan's deep dive and Meghan's disrespect and Meghan's stupid claims. Oh, I had to always wear grey because I couldn't compete with the rest of them. Sorry, beige, because I couldn't compete with the rest of them. She still always wears beige. I mean, who's she failing to compete with now? Maybe herself. So then we have Spare, which follows hot on the heels of the Spotify archetypes, which turns out to be a turkey of the highest order, and takes place around Thanksgiving as well. Then we have Netflix, and we have Spare as well. And Spare is launched to much acclaim. Penguin Random House sets things up in such a way that the book is going to be a huge bestseller, which it is. It's never sold at full price. It's always sold at a maximum of half the recommended retail price. And I know from my own personal experience, when you ordered one copy from Amazon, you got two, because I ordered one, paid for one, and got two copies. That was to bump up the figures. And yes, they had a tremendous success on paper, but it will have cost Penguin Random House a great deal of money. It also ended up costing Meghan much of the goodwill that she had up to then had from the diehards who were still rooting for her. That mockery of Queen Elizabeth II coming so close after her death. And also people were fully aware of the fact that had she been alive, she would have been devastated by the way they behaved. Do you begin to see how every single thing they did that was supposed to harm their adversaries ended up harming themselves? And people began to think, well, yeah, but no, they're the ones who are at fault, not the royal family. Also, in Spare, Harry violated everyone's privacy. Harry and Meghan have been insistent that their privacy should be respected. Yet, what did they do? He violated, and there was no doubt in everybody's mind that she had a lot of input where that book was concerned. She proudly micromanages everything. Are we expected to believe that she never even looked at the script? Oh, I don't think so. Well, Harry not only showed what a jerk he was, he wrote about the loss of his manhood, the opposite of his maidenhead. This is YouTube. I suppose he lost his manhood with Meghan, but he lost the male equivalent of his maidenhead. And I'm not going to mention her name. I knew who she was at the time. Anybody who knew Lady Edith Foxwell knew who the people were involved. And anybody who knew anything about the Beaufort Polo Club knew as well. And Harry lied about this girl as well. Said she was an older woman. She's younger than Meghan. He lied about her and showed himself to be a total jerk. He also spoke the truth about William by actually describing William's private parts. Now, which bit of private parts should be private didn't Harry understand. Staggering. He also violated Catherine's privacy. He made out that Catherine was, according to Meghan, the contradiction of what he and Meghan had said Catherine was in the engagement interview. So you have all of these lies and all of these inconsistencies and all of these violations of other people's rights. And they are posing as victims. They being Meghan and Harry, they are posing as victims of a cruel world and a cruel institution Yet they're the ones displaying cruelty. And of course, Meghan adds fuel to the fire by making out that Michelle Hussein, who interviewed them for their engagement interview, had set up the whole thing, and it was a fake reality show when it was no such thing. Well, by this time, of course, people have had so much input from Meghan and Harry that is slaps in the face of perceptiveness that people thought, excuse me. Then, of course, there were the books. There was my book, Meghan and Harry, The Real Story. Then there was Funding Freedom and Finding Freebies. They were such victims. Then there was Revenge by Tom Bauer. Then, fast forward, last year, there was my update, Meghan and Harry, The Real Story, Persecutors or Victims, which absolutely nailed everything to the post. And then what happens? The king is diagnosed with cancer. Harry takes it upon himself, knowing it's going to get him good publicity, or hoping it will get him good publicity, takes it upon himself to fly over, informs his father's office while he is en route that he's coming. His father and stepmother, who are incandescent, incidentally, about the way he has dealt with their relationship in the book Spare, because the king had always said a red line is attacking Camilla. And what does Harry do? He attacks Camilla. He got 12 minutes with his father. Since then, he's not been able to see his father. He's not allowed to see his father. His father won't receive his calls. His father won't speak to him. His father won't have anything to do with him. Then comes Catherine's diagnosis of cancer. What do Harry and Meghan do? They're busy praising the Sussex squad for their loyal support. But have they ever, and did they ever at any time during the appalling behaviour of their Sussex squad, with the most awful lies and stories about Catherine and William, and what William did to Catherine, and Catherine is an AI, and Catherine is on life support, and Catherine is blah, blah, blah. I mean, I wouldn't even condescend to repeat any of them. That's so dreadful. Did they ask them to call off? No. And when Endgame was published, and amid scabies, and Meghan and Harry, because they're all in this together, have they ever, one of the three of them, have they ever denied that either Charles or Catherine is a racist? No. But they being amid scabies and his band of conspirators, because he didn't do it on his own, whoever gave him the information that Charles and Catherine were the racists that had been identified on Oprah, was there now the only two people who can reasonably have had any, well, all roads lead to Rome and all sources lead back to the origin. And the origin of that story is Meghan and Harry on Oprah. Harry saying there was one comment before he got married, and Meghan saying there were many conversations while she was pregnant with Archie. So right there, they didn't agree with each other. But have they disagreed with Amit Scabies, who goes to the trouble of sabotaging the Dutch edition of the book to provide the wrong version to be printed so that Charles and Catherine will be identified as the racists. Has any of the three of them ever denied that Catherine or Charles is a racist? No, they haven't. Well, with all of that going on, people by then are so totally enlightened as to the debasedness of Meghan and Harry that you then have a series of revelations, because Harry and Meghan up to then had spent a great deal of money. They had spent with Sunshine Sachs. Evidently at one stage they owed Sunshine Sachs $2.5 million, and Sunshine Sachs washed its hands of them. Nobody likes being owed money. So they were paying very dearly for the constant assault on us with daily stories, each of which disagreed with the other about them. And they then flood the world with contradictory stories about themselves. And by then people are so fed up and assaulted, because it's an assault on people's consciousness. So what do? You have South Park taking the mickey out of them. You have Chris Rock taking the mickey out of them, because up to that point, they had had consistently positive press in the United States of America, although their press in the United Kingdom had become consistently bad. But in America, it was positive. It was very negative here, but very positive there. The worm turned. You had that shop in the shop window mocking them. Then I can't remember the name of it. You had Chris Rock, you had South Park. Then to show to the extent that failures were, and I can't go into all the things that happened, the Hollywood Reporter. But before the Hollywood Reporter came the cut. Alison P. Davis in 2022 did an interview in the cut with Meghan, where she faithfully reported on Meghan's antics. And by faithfully reporting on them and using Meghan's words and deeds, showed what a total fraud Meghan is. Well, of course, Meghan tried to do with her what she had done with Piers Morgan and with Sharon Osbourne. And Alison P. Davis was moved on to, if not permanent, semi-permanent leave. So what does she do? She writes an episode for some television thing about surrogacy going wrong. I love it. So then fast forward, we now have the Hollywood Reporter has kicked in, and it states that Meghan is a bully, a dictator in high heels, etc., etc. Then you have Tina Brown piling in with how disastrous Meghan is. So you now have a real pile-on of all the ships not only docking but cramming the wharf. They have made so many mistakes. Harry's lawsuits against the newspapers, Meghan threatening newspapers, Harry suing. Harry has not actually had a proper victory. Harry has been, by the various judges, accorded little victories while often losing big time. Let us see what happens, because Mr. Justice Fancourt earlier this week, Mr. Justice Fancourt made it absolutely clear that he is not going to allow Harry and David Sherborne to turn his court into a lynch mob so that Harry's obsessions can be satisfied. Now, Harry's obsessions started by his own account, with David Sherborne pumping him up, and Harry was going to protect Meghan. Harry, you want to protect Meghan? Provide the world with proof that she gave birth to those two children. That will provide all the proof that anybody needs to answer all the doubts. All of this started with Meghan bullying the staff and Harry bullying the staff as well. And this was before they even went to Australia, because Harry and Meghan are terrible bullies, and they were throwing their weight around at Buckingham Palace. And the American press gave them the benefit of the doubt until they started to throw she actually started to throw her weight around in California. And you know, I've been told by people in California that when people twigged, which took a while for them to twig, that Thomas Markle was Meghan's father, and Thomas Markle had lit them, and they had liked Thomas Markle. Thomas Markle had a very good reputation in Hollywood. He's 3 times an Emmy winner. He's a likable man, and he is good at what he does. And when people started to twig, hang on a second, Meghan's father is Thomas Markle, and that's the person she's been traducing. I understand that at that point, a lot of big names in Hollywood decided, I don't want to have anything to do with Meghan Markle. You notice George and Amal Clooney went to the wedding, notwithstanding the fact that they didn't know Meghan and Harry, but they had been asked to the wedding. Amal Clooney was at the baby shower at the Mark Hotel in New York. Amal Clooney and George Clooney have nothing to do with Meghan anymore. I am told George Clooney used to be lit by Thomas Markle and liked Thomas Markle. And it was only a matter of time before people in Hollywood made the connection. And this is one of the banana skins which has tripped Meghan up. Had she never abused her father, had she never traduced her father, had she never set him up the way she set him up, in the most disgusting, disgraceful, treacherous, and in my view, evil way, she would have had a far clearer run in Hollywood than she did. Meghan is the ideal example of somebody who was clever enough to use charm to conceal the rabid reality of what she truly was on an upward trajectory. And once she reached where she wanted to be, she dropped the act enough for the observer to know what they were truly getting. Meghan's big mistake has been to fail to understand that the average person is a lot more intelligent and sensible and decent and down to earth and good, what Nixon called the silent majority, than what contemptuous, arrogant, ignorant arrivists like her think of the general public. It's really interesting that there is a type of person, and Meghan typifies them, who is so overweeningly self-important and so arrogant as to be stupid that they don't see that everybody can see through them. Well, Meghan, she fooled some of the people some of the time. She wasn't able to fool all of the people all of the time. And things have reached a stage where she's fooling very few of the people any of the time. What a trajectory from an ambitious, spoilt brat, well-educated, pampered, petted, well provided for, adored by her father, and obviously placated by her mother on the occasions when she saw the mother. Ends up being an outstanding success and is too stupid, ultimately, to not continue to conceal the reality of what she is, and is too self-deluded as to think that the charm that she deployed and duped people into thinking was the reality can be dispensed with now, and that when she wants to put it on, everybody's going to believe it. Let's go. I'm so clever. I'm so girlish. I mean, I'm 12 years old. I'm just so girlish. so demure. I'm so demure. Butter wouldn't melt in my mouth. Well, I'm sure harder things have been absolutely driven to smithereens, much less melting. So I think butter would melt in her mouth. I'm pretty sure granite loses its hardness after time as well, because Meghan has choppers that could absolutely masticate anything into mush. But what she hasn't been able to do is fool all the people all the time. It's ironic because had she just maintained the facade that she used to become the success that she did, she would most likely be the most popular woman on earth at the moment. Instead of which, she's one of the most reviled. And on that note, I'll say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please keep the questions and comments coming in so I will know what you would like us to be speaking about. And hopefully something different. Thank you so much. Godspeed. And if you have truly enjoyed this, would you care to like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and take good care. Bye-bye.